Welcome, welcome. Well, welcome. The first step that I think we all need to kind of pause on or think about is that health comes from the inside out. And what that means is that if I have a symptom or a problem or anything that I'm feeling, my body's telling me to pay attention, I have some pain, some problem. It came from the inside and expresses itself outward. And that expression on the outside doesn't necessarily mean it's the problem or the cause of the problem. But allopathic medicine, in its hope to help people, says, well, I know that pain or that problem. We can remove that or diminish it or numb it so you don't feel it. But it doesn't mean that it fixed the issue per se. So when we're looking from the inside out, we need to find out what is it that would help our bodies to function at their highest level? How do we have best function and optimal function? And really we call it communication as a chiropractor in our bodies so that our bodies can be self-healing and self-regulating. So what are the things that inhibit us from being self-healing and self-regulating? What we want to talk about a little bit. We want to talk about how our bodies in good communication help to fend off viruses and bacteria, help to regulate our blood sugar, help to, regulate our sleep habits, reduce pain, improve mobility. But when our bodies start to lose these things, that means that our communication is reduced, that there's interference or stress on our system in some way or another. So the chiropractic premise really of why chiropractors treat people is not just because someone has a headache or someone has a back pain, although we do well with those kinds of things. It's a little deeper than that. It's the fact that your spine, at least the bones in your spine, they house your spinal cord. And all these little nerves, these nerve roots that come off your spinal cord are very close proximity to the bones themselves. And if your brain is going to send signals out these nerves, it needs to happen at a certain communication speed and efficiency. And if there's interference or irritation, which only takes like the weight of a dime, honestly, to affect the information being flown from the brain to different parts of the body, that can affect your body's ability to maybe digest food properly. You may have digestive issues. You may have a pain. But also remember that if the body has to send signals back to the brain through these same nerves, that can be affected too. So as the body's coordination and communication is reduced, the body starts to have a reduced amount of health. Think of it like a dimmer switch on a light bulb. That it's not like you're dead. The lights aren't off. Okay, but at 100% brightness, that's our body communicating fully. And subluxation, the word subluxation, which is just a term we give to when the body misaligns or restricts in motion and irritates these nerves, that's that subluxation. The lux is like light, if we break down the word. And ation is a condition. So it's a condition of less light, the sub being less. It's a condition of less light. If there's less light flowing through our body at the speed that it should, there's an interference or a decrease in our ultimate ability to function. And ultimately, dysfunction causes dis-ease, a lack of ease in our body, which ultimately leads to symptoms. So our body's many cries for help with our pains are kind of at the lowest flow down from the inside out. The outward expression are those symptoms. So people do come into our office with symptoms of arthritis, symptoms of fibromyalgia or conditions. Because what we have is, remember medically, when we have a problem, medicine is really, really good at describing the problem. Fibro is like fibrous tissue and myalgia is muscle. So fibrous muscle tissue and algia just means pain. So I got fibrous muscle pain. So we're really good at describing it medically, but to understand why it's there is usually tricky in medicine. Medical treatments at this point, the latest science in fibromyalgia or muscle pain or polymyalgia just means many algias or pains in muscle, all that ultimately, the most constant research says it's a neurological condition. Well, what was I just talking about? The nervous system, right? Does that mean there's a fibromyalgia point? No. If fibromyalgia, one of the dictators are many points in the body that are tender, but there's no point. I just adjust for fibromyalgia. But if there is interference and irritation on the nervous system that we know, the current latest research says there's a nervous system irritation or condition, then that means the brain has interference or irritation due to misalignments and dysfunction. And so if we start to remove that, we give the brain some tolerance to all the other stressors that can push things in the wrong direction. Being a neurological condition, a lot of times medically, we also see people being prescribed some sort of anti-anxiety drugs or antidepressive types of drugs with fibromyalgia because the pain of the muscles is more of the body being extra sensitive to stimulus. How does that happen? Well, in your brain stem actually, you have something called the reticular formation. But the reticular formation is a part of the brain, is basically like a filter for neurological signals. Okay, there's stuff going up and down all the time. So this reticular formation has to filter signals. In fibromyalgia, what they found is that that filter has become overloaded and kind of weakened in the sense that it's just not filtering out as much as it should. So these signals, it doesn't take as much of a signal to get through the filter. So a pressure, anyone's been adjusted by me, there's probably points I push on, you're like, ooh, right? You're like, well, that's sensitive, right? In the brain, the same thing's happening where now it doesn't take so much of a pressure to elicit a response that's pain. So pain signals are always happening in your body. They're called noxious signals. They're just signals from a certain nerve type that goes to your brain. This is how we perceive pain. So those pain and nerve endings will send signals. Now, not all of them will get to you, but in fibromyalgia, more get to you. Why? Well, we don't really know. What we can tell you is if we go back to understanding the roots of chiropractic and what causes us to dysfunction and have disease, there's three major things. The first is physical things that can affect us. We would call traumas. Trauma, like I was in a car accident, I had bad fall as a kid. We all under certain physical traumas can affect our body's alignment, that makes sense, and affect our nervous system and ultimately sensitize us even in our brain level. We have micro traumas too, so don't forget, the way we sit, the way we stand, the work we do repetitively can cause trauma every day. There's that force. Gravity. If we're not in the ideal position and ideal motion, gravity is constantly causing stress on us. So how much tolerance do you have? Ultimately, how much tolerance does your body have? It has a lot. Your body was built to survive. So one thing I want you to know or remember this is that you might want optimal health. Your body was actually never built to try to give you optimal health. Your body was built to keep you alive. So it's going to do things. It will distort and dysfunction all it needs so you can keep doing whatever it is you want it to do. So your body isn't going to say, hey, that's a bad wellness choice today. You're not going to get that signal probably. You eventually will, and then it will just be called arthritis or fibromyalgia or something, but you wouldn't know it at the level at what the body probably is trying to tell you. That's subconscious. So your body needs to have a certain amount of tolerance to certain things. And in fibromyalgia and all these conditions, that filter becomes overwhelmed. It could be due to the stress on the nervous system. You could have a bad neck curve. You could have a really bad stress, and that really affects and sensitizes the body. So you do feel headaches easier. You feel whatever easier. You might also have some of the other T's that are going on. Our thoughts. Probably one of the biggest stressors on our body are the thoughts that create things. Stress is definitely linked to inflammation, and inflammation is linked to a lot of neurological disease, especially neuroinflammation. But inflammation itself is just the fact that our bodies weren't being properly taken care of, and stress can be one of the factors that increase that inflammation. There's some factor that our thoughts and our effects of what's happened to our bodies are held in there. But the beauty of chiropractic is that I can sometimes make a release, and it releases all those things at once, okay? So thoughts are the other T. So we've got traumas and thoughts. The last are toxins. If you want to look back to where a lot of diseases come from or other problems that are chronic or long-standing, toxins are in our environment all the time. More and more. I think we're all pretty aware of that at this point, that we live in somewhat of an unnatural environment. We're not outside breathing fresh air. But when our bodies are not in a natural environment, they can start to respond to smaller stimulus as a chronic stress. Could be our job. Could be our drive to work. It could be our relationships. It could be a lot of different things. But our bodies are responding to stressors. But if we are not outside and breathing fresh air, drinking fresh water, and eating fresh food, then our bodies are probably exposed to toxins in our water, food, and air. Very likely. Yeah? So toxins will affect our body's function. To go to arthritis a little bit, there's a lot of different types of arthritis, but in a half hour and just a base thing, what I want to talk about is more of osteoarthritis. I'm going to kind of narrow it down. This is what the majority of people come in probably to my office or know people who have arthritis in their joints. Osteoarthritis means the bones themselves have become misaligned, either in the spine, in the elbow, in the knee, anywhere. There's some dysfunction of alignment and movement. So there's usually two components that start to cause your body to create arthritis. And we're going to talk about what perpetuates it in a second. But in very basic sense, even the poor birth process itself could have been traumatic to a poor little baby. Their neck curve, instead of it being a nice C-shaped curvature, is kind of straightened or flat. They come in at 20-some years old and I say, man, you had a reverse curve. Could have started when they were a baby, which means that gravity's been working on them abnormally for a long amount of time and not in a structurally sound position. So when you think of arthritis, think of it very simply as your car's alignment. And if you got your tires are, let's say, your joints. And if your tires are well aligned, they're going to wear out evenly and not sooner than they should. If you got bad alignment, you're going to start to see wear on your tires uneven. And that's the same thing that's happening in your joint. So you think knees are kind of, I feel like they're easy to understand. But if you've got a rotation or a restriction, you got a bad injury as a kid, or you sprained it, you were hitting football, and it kind of jarred it around, or you put a lot of miles on it. Instead of that joint being really lined up perfectly, it's a little rotated or it's a little tilted, or the muscles are pulling it in ways that aren't natural, then your tires are out of alignment. It's going to wear and tear for a while before you have any idea, because you've got cartilage on those surfaces. It should just glide and move. And when you're young, you can produce that cartilage pretty quickly. You can replenish the fluid, but over time, it's going to start to wear. And if that alignment isn't corrected in that movement, that's the second part, not just alignment, but just the movement's proper, then you're going to move that joint fluidly and equally. But if it's not, it's going to start to wear that cartilage down. When it starts to wear down enough that there's not a lot left, or the body has become so kind of worn down and injured that the joint even moves more than it should, which is kind of a hypermobile joint, the body itself intelligently goes, I got to kind of like stop this movement. It's not right. So it starts to form bones off those two knee bones. It starts to form other bone off of the bone to try to almost fuse itself together. The arthritis is kind of your body's attempt to balance the stress that's on it. But your body is responding to the forces you place on it. So if you have osteoporosis and you are told that you want to increase bone mass, what do? Put more force on your bones, right? You don't like do less force. You don't like just go, well, I probably should just not walk anymore. No, the doctor says, put a weight vest on, do weight training, put more force on your bones, and hopefully those little cells in there create more stronger bone. So the same thing is going on in the sense that when you have a joint that's out of alignment, you want the forces that are being placed on it are abnormal. And so the body's responding by putting more bone over here maybe than right building up, and that's where those osteophytes come from as well. So once it becomes that is the issue. So if 20 years, 30 years goes past and you're finally like, man, it just isn't getting better. Get an x-ray taken and go, oh, you got arthritis. That amount of stressors have been going on for a long time. And at a microscopic level, arthritis can even start in 2 weeks on a microscopic level. So arthritis itself can be complicated in a lot of ways. And the pain of it, the movement of it, there's a lot of factors that can perpetuate it, make it worse. I can tell you, there's so many patients of mine who will start to make some changes to their diet first, usually. Typically, the best thing is an anti-inflammatory diet. So most people are eating a diet that's increased in inflammation. Their inflammatory processes are increased. Either too many carbs or too much sugar. You can even have too much meat for some people. They just can't digest it all, and that can cause acidity in the body that causes those joints to be stiff. But the majority of patients need to increase their fruits and vegetables, their fibers, reduce their complex carbohydrates, breads and rice and pastas and cereals, and probably balance or maintain their protein or maybe increase that a little bit, okay? If you're eating more fruits and vegetables and protein sources, meat, usually your inflammation is going to reduce down. A ketogenic diet is typically what that's called. Okay. We have some supplements that will help to support a change. If you're like, okay, listen, doc, I'm like on this side of that scale and you want me to eat here, there's some drops and things homeopathically that can maybe help you tune into that a little easier. If you need a little boost, there's things to do that. But starting to shift away from anything that's packaged and processed and prepared, things that can last for a long time, things that are in boxes, they usually just are processed in some way or another. The more fresh and raw we get, the better. Okay. The more fiber, the better for our digestive system, which is my second point of arthritis. If you can reduce inflammation load on your body, usually a lot of the inflammation comes from your gut first and it spreads around the rest of your body. So our guts are usually, most of us are too permeable. There's too much leaking through into our blood. We don't have good probiotics anymore. We don't have a lot of stress, and that reduces the lining on our gut. So that protective lining, basically, it's like a mucus lining, is not protecting us as much. We got a lot of bad bacteria. We've destroyed that lining with stress and junk that we've eaten. And now anything that we eat, even if it's good, I'm like eating broccoli, doc, and it could upset you. Anything good that's leaking through. So we got to help that lining out. So the second part of that is healing that digestive system, which might mean getting food sensitivity panels done. If you can get a ketogenic diet, you can heal your gut a little bit. Your inflammation in your joints would probably be a lot less if you have arthritis. So those are two of the big things. The third thing is even though it's sore, you gotta move it. If you don't move it, you will start to get more and more stiff, more sore. And the joint itself really needs that movement to keep fluidity, to keep hydrated as best it can. Try to at least move it within the right ranges. Maybe you have to do pool or get on a bike or do different things, but your body was built with so many joints, they all need to move. So just looking at yourself, and so you gotta move these things, you don't move them. That's why we adjust. Ultimately, we're gonna make adjustments to the joints in your spine and some of them in your knees or ankles because they're stuck. And we wanna get them moving again so the fluid builds up and you can minimize arthritis from building up. When we adjust your joints in your spine, we help the discs in there get more fluid. So when we unlock them and they move, fluid imbibes in there, just like it does in the joints. That's why you guys feel me pulling your hips sometimes, because I want that fluid to get back in there, okay? The other reason we're gonna adjust you is so that the communication happens, that you're at least moving as functional as proper, and your brain's getting all the right signals as much as it can for the time that it's in alignment, right? So fibromyalgia, arthritis, they're conditions. They tell us that the body's not working well. Chiropractic has some solutions to it, but it's all not just in the adjustment. It's an understanding that the reason I needed to adjust you in the first place was because there's toxins in our diet, there's stress on our bodies, and there probably were traumas in ways that we move. And the more you can start to change some of those things, the better off you're gonna be. Have a good evening. Thanks for being here. Hopefully you'll learn something and something to share with others. All right.